Hi, my name is Rakel and I work at Colibri. I've been there for the past 2.5 years. And before that, I worked at Advania for 2.5 years. So I'm here talking to you about accessibility. I get stuck all the time, how to empower you to care about accessibility. Is it by telling you it's basic human rights? Is it by telling you that 15% of people have disabilities in the world? Is it by telling you there's one blind person who goes through your website every single day and controls your ranking on Google? Or when I'm talking to a client, can you afford not to implement the website for 15% of your clients? Sorry. My mouse is lost. See? So it's really unfair that a non-disabled person can apply for a credit card, can shop online, can do it whenever, wherever they want, on their way to work or just, whenever. But a disabled person does not have that option. It has to go physically to the store, to the bank, and apply for a credit card or do their shopping. And for me, it's just not fair. I haven't always been focused on accessibility, and when I think about my time at school, it didn't really get mentioned. And it wasn't until I had worked at Advania for a year, I got a website, Þjóðskrá, and I had to do the HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and I had to make it accessible. I had no idea what to do, so I started Googling how to make website accessible. And I got some tools. There were online tools. There were extensions in my browser that I could use, and I did all the recommended stuff. I got 100 score out of 100. But I had no idea how it got translated to the screen reader, because I didn't have a screen reader on my computer. So it was enough that I got a score 100 out of 100, and it got the most accessible website 2017, and I have no idea how. But there was a blind person who went through the website and said yeah, you did a great job. But there was always a voice in the back of my head how does this work? How does a link translate to a screen reader? So what to do? I remember I asked a lot of developers, what can I do to learn about accessibility, where to start? And nobody had answers. They just rolled their eyes, when I mentioned the word documentation. Nobody wants to talk about it. So I just started Googling everything that I was doing, and I just added the word accessibility to it. So when I was doing accordion, I just added the word accessible. And I clicked for, example, 5 links or something. One told me to use ARIA attributes, and another one told me not to use ARIA attributes. Then I was supposed to use tab index, and then it was forbidden to use tab index. So I always thought I had something, yes, this is correct, and then I just got back to square one. So, being a developer, I was off by 1. I should have started with square 0. And that is how a screen reader really works. It was not easy find. I just wanted the article or something to tell me how it really worked. So all browsers that support accessibility include an accessibility API. And this is built into the browser. And that generates accessibility tree. And this is just a screenshot from Chrome. So where you can see the styles, you have the accessibility tab. And I don't use screen reader every day. This is enough for me. I can inspect a link, and I can see there what is generated and what the screen reader will read. So we have the contents, and then we have the role link. So that was enough for me for now. So I just want to quickly go over the users, because for me, I thought it was just blind people. And that's really not the case. For example, if we talk about people who are colorblind, this is like a very generic mistake that when you have an input and the only validation that the user can see is a red or green border, nothing else. And for somebody who's colorblind, they can't see the difference. So they just think the website is broken or the form. So they just continue with their life and do something else. This is also good to have in mind when you're doing like pie charts and line charts, like don't have it only based on colors. And this is a really cool extension. It's called I Want to See Like the Colorblind. And this is like a last check that I do. And it's just a really good reminder to have the content not based on color. So the visually impaired and dyslexia have the same criteria. You have to have a readable font, you have to have good spacing, and you have to consider not to have the sentences too long on the screen, like 20 words per line or something. And I recently learned that people with dyslexia, they use screen readers. So they listen to the screen reader and they read. So that's also helpful for them. People with reduced mobility, example, if we take a person who has 100% sight, but they have a problem using the mouse, they use the tab key on the keyboard. So it's really important that they see where they are. And I know me as a developer, when I'm working on a button or input, I always remove the focus border. And if I don't do it, the designer tells me to do it because it's ugly. So this is really important for just to see where you are. So if you remove it when you're doing a button, I do that too, just add it back in. And there's also, if you just Google it, you can find a focus border for buttons and inputs when you're using the keyboard. So it doesn't show when you're using the mouse, if that's pleasing to the designer. And then ADHD, just consider not to have too many animations, nothing too crazy. That's the only thing that I can say here. The most common mistakes, I also do like audits for people and companies for accessibility. So what I've noticed is that people don't add alt attributes to images. I remember learning this at school, and I thought the alt attribute was only rendered when the browser couldn't render the image. So it would have some placeholder text. But I was completely wrong. It's also for screen readers. So if you have this image here and you don't have the alt attribute, the screen reader will read the source path. And I remember when I was working at Advania, we were told just add something to the alt. So they would put in the source path and the alt attribute. And to keep in mind here, like if it's decorative, just have an empty alt tag. The screen reader will detect the image, see there's an empty alt tag, and just move on. And you never have to say like picture off or image off. The screen reader will do that for you. Contrast, there's so many contrast errors. It's ridiculous, but me as a developer, I always have a conversation with the designer and just tell them like this is not accessible. And sometimes I just tell them like just 2 pixels up on the font size, and that's enough. So I feel like it's our job also as developers that we look out for the contrast. This is the most common one, and that all page content must be contained by landmarks. I had no idea what it was for. It was just something that Google told me all the time. So it's really hard for screen readers to reach a content that's not inside a landmark. And landmarks are like main, nav, aside, header, and footer. Also, a really cool thing about screen readers, they have like have this view for the screen reader user. They can see all the landmarks, and it's like an index of a book. So this is something that we need to consider when we are building up a web page. They also can see like a list of links that are on the web page and a list of buttons. And to keep in mind there is when you have like a web page with news articles, and you have like see more, see more, see more, they will just get a list of see mores. Like they can't see what's behind it. So you can easily add an ARIA attribute to the link and just add the name of the news or the article. So it would be see more about this. This is my favorite sentence after I got into accessibility, that if it behaves like a button, looks like a button, then it is a button. I know when I first started and I was doing a button, like you start off with this awful gray thing with black borders and it just looks awful. And you have to start by stripping away the background color and the border. And most commonly you would use a div or span because it's like a clean component for you. But there's so much that you also have to do if you're using a div or a span. You have to give it a role, you have to say it's a role button, and you have to give it a tab index, and there's multiple things that we will miss. So it's really important just to use the basic HTML attributes that you can use. And also a thing to keep in mind here, a button is a call to action. So it's like opening a modal pop-up window or submitting a form. Those, like, they have to look like a button. And a link, it changes the path or the URL. So you have to keep this in mind, that a button looks like a button and a link looks like a link. So many times I see forms and they don't have a label. They only have a span or a paragraph next to it. So the screen reader user would go through the form and it doesn't know what the input is about because it doesn't have an associated label with it. I remember when I started at Advania, I was supposed to do a radio button, and I did a radio button input, and I did a span, and then I had to do an on-click, and I had to talk to the input. It was just ridiculous. So just use the core elements. I wanted to tell you a story about a colleague of mine. His name is JD, he's from South Africa. And I was with him for from day one when he arrived to Iceland. And he had to get a Kennitala, he had to apply for debit cards, he had to shop at IKEA. And it was really important for him that HTML had a lang attribute. Because if it didn't have that, he couldn't Google Translate the web page. So he just wrote a template, an email. It just like, don't you care about accessibility? I can't use your website, and can you really afford to lose my business? I know people. And he put on a reminder for 3 days, and he checked again. If it wasn't fixed by then, he would write them an email how to fix it, because he just thought it was ridiculous. So a little bit about the things that the tools won't tell you. This is the worst thing that I can't develop. It's a modal pop-up window. I really hate developing them. And especially making them accessible. If you don't do it from the beginning, it's going to be a pain in the ass and it's going to take 2 weeks because you don't know what you're doing. The first thing to keep in mind here is the button that opens up the pop-up window. You have to tell the user that they're opening up a window where they are trapped. So you can add an ARIA attribute to the button to tell them that. And when they open a modal pop-up, the focus has to be inside the modal pop-up at all time until the user closes it. So when you're tapping through the modal pop-up, you have to go in circles. You can't go outside. And you always have to end with the X, or they have to use escape to go outside the modal pop-up. I tried to find a good example, but I couldn't find it. So yeah. It's also things like skip the navigation link. It should be on top of the main, and it should be before you go into the menu. Because you imagine going through a website and you're navigating and you have to listen to the navigation every time. So this is a neat way to we care about you, let's just skip the content. And it has to be focusable and also visible for people who are using the tab key. I thought the screen reader would do this for me. I thought screen readers would see, it would open in a new tab or a new window, but they don't. You have to tell the user. I know there's a misspelling, it's supposed to be _blank. So this is one of many, many ways to do this. This is just a global style. So every link that has a target blank, we add a before element with the content opens a new tab. And the other stuff is just to hide the content. So this is also to keep in mind that everything that's in your content will be read by screen readers. Other things to keep in mind is when you have like a search form and the user is typing in, it hits search and nothing happens. They can't, like, we have to tell the screen reader that something happened. So we can add an ARIA live attribute to the div that contains the search results. And it's ARIA live and you put polite, then they will read out loud when the new search results come in. And also routing, like React router, Next router, they don't have accessibility built in them. So when you're routing between pages, you get thrown out of the browser. So you have to tap into the browser again. So this is really bad, and I've been making like Git tickets so many times. I want to show you a video of voice control. I don't know if you've seen this, but it just, to keep in mind that a button has to look like a button, and a link is a link. See, does audio work?
Wake up. Voice control is a breakthrough feature that gives you full control of your devices, with just your voice, period. It's a whole new way to do everything you love, period. Like this. Correct love. 16. Open photos. Scroll up. Show numbers. 13. Click share. 3. Tim. Next field. Let's try this one today. Thumbs up emoji. Click send. Open maps. Show grid. Long press at 20. Open app switcher. 4. Tap share. Tap Tim. Tap send. Hey, good to see you. Open music. Turn up the volume.
So I think it's really important that a button is a button. Like, this new technology is here. You can try it with your computer. It's really awesome. But just stick to the core. See? Yeah, that was all I was going to say. Any questions? Yeah?
Are there any libraries that can help you?
Iceland, you can have settings there for accessibility, but most people turn it off. I use Storybook a lot. They have like an accessibility feature built in, so it just screams at you if something is wrong. There's a lot of NPM packages that you can have on pre-push and pre-commit that just yells at you like, no, this is not accessible. And also I want to talk about site improve extension. It's like the best extension to get when you're getting into accessibility, because it makes you manually go over everything on your web page. Even though you have an alt attribute on your image, it would like check, like, is this the correct alt attribute? So you can't miss anything with a website when you're checking for accessibility. Sorry?
What was the name of the
Site improve. Yeah.
Were there a lot of mistakes when you got the award in 2017?
I haven't checked. Like, I haven't gone through with a screen reader. It was 3 years ago, so I'm not going to check that. Okay, thank you.